Hello and welcome on this Tuesday before Thanksgiving. In a couple of days, the Dallas Cowboys will be taking on the Carolina Panthers. It ought to be an interesting ball game. The Cowboys snapped a 7-game losing streak this past Sunday, and they get ready to take on an undefeated team, possibly the best team in the National Football League in the Carolina Panthers. I'm Bryan Houston. This is a Rattle and Hum Sports Spreecast. And joining us now to talk about this ball game, break it down for you, Matthew Postins, the beat writer for the Dallas Cowboys. How you doing, Matthews?
Hey, I'm fine, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you, sir. First of all, let's talk a little bit about this ball game. The first thing I have to ask right off the top is how in the world is a 3-7 team a 1-point favorite according to Vegas in this ball game over a 10-0 Carolina Panthers team?
Uh, I don't know. Vegas has their own way of doing things. I've never really understood the line when it comes to which team should be favored and by how much they should be favored. I do know that Vegas tends to favor teams that are at home. That's pretty well established. But deeming Dallas a 1-point favorite at 3-7 over a 10-0 team, I think that's kind of stretching incredulity right there, if you ask me. I consider the Panthers to be about a field goal favorite in this game. Yes, the Cowboys are playing better. Yes, Tony Romo makes a difference, but this is an entirely different Panthers team than the one we saw last year that won its division with a losing record.
Well, this Carolina Panthers team comes in loaded. Cam Newton right now may be playing the best football of anybody in the league right now, and I apologize. I'm trying to get this picture to come up where it's supposed to, and it's not working for me, so hang with me on this. But right now, Cam Newton, for all the criticism about the way he plays, and he doesn't have the most beautiful numbers in the world or anything like that, but this guy's playing MVP ball right now.
Well, he just wins games. That's all he does. That's all he did in college. That's all he's done in the NFL for the most part. He's got this rare blend of a guy that can run the football, that can make things happen, and a pretty solid passer. He's really improved as a passer over the last few years, at least in terms of what you need in the NFL. He's a different kind of quarterback because he's bigger than most QBs that play the position and run. Therefore, he can take a little more punishment than most players. Um, and don't underestimate the way he leads his football team. He's incredibly charismatic. A week ago there was a mother who wrote letters to Cam Newton about the pelvic thrust in the end zone against Tennessee, which I thought was kind of absurd because cheerleaders do pelvic thrusts every week, and nobody writes letters to teams about them. But in the last week, Newton has been hanging out with a cancer patient. He's been handing out footballs at football games. And then on Monday, he spent his own money to feed 900 kids in the Carolina area. So to me, this guy's a born leader. That's kind of what he's been his entire career, as long as he's been on the map since he was at Auburn. He leads and everybody else follows. And for the most part, he leads teams and he leads his teammates in the right direction. So the numbers in
And
that case don't really matter that much.
yeah, and we had a guy like that by the name of Aikman who didn't put up astronomical numbers, but won a lot of football games, including 3 Super Bowl rings.
Yeah, he has a good team around him. It's not a great team. He's got a solid offensive line. He's got a good running game with Jonathan Stewart. The receivers are kind of no name, with the exception of Greg Olson. They're very talented tight end. So he's a little more dynamic in this offense than Aikman was because A, of the running ability, obviously, but also B, the fact that he really doesn't have that true number one receiver to throw the football to, but he manages to get these guys to play at a higher level when they're on the field with them, and that's what elite quarterbacks do. They actually help bring up the level of play of their teammates. And I'm not sure Newton qualifies as an elite quarterback yet, but he has those kinds of qualities because he makes people better around him.
Well, he threw 5 touchdown passes against the Redskins last week, and certainly has this ball club rolling offensively. They're scoring 30 points a game right now. So whatever they're doing, I'm sure they want to keep on doing it this weekend when they take on the Cowboys here at AT&T Stadium.
Well, they do a lot of what the Cowboys do in that they want to establish the run early in the game. They do that with Cam Newton. They do that with Jonathan Stewart, and they do it with a punishing offensive line. And everything's predicated upon them being able to run the ball. That's how they're able to create one-on-one matchups in the passing game. It's one of the big ways they're able to create the matchups that help Greg Olsen be so productive at the tight end position. So their game plan is going to look very familiar to Cowboys fans, in that they could look quite a bit like Dallas's team from a year ago. And Carolina plays to that identity. They don't deviate too much from it. They don't try to do too many different things. Part of that is because Cam Newton is such a dynamic player, and part of it is because the talent hasn't quite caught up to where this team's record is right now, in my opinion. They've got players on this team, especially at the skill positions, that are playing significantly better than their talent might suggest.
And the other thing they have is a fantastic defense.
Mm-hmm. They do. And they went out and got Jared Allen in the offseason from Chicago, and I thought it was honestly thought it was somewhat of a superfluous move because they already had a group of talented pass rushers. But he has really come in and become a great fit on that defense and made their pass rush just so much better. Maybe even better than it was when they had a certain defensive end manning the edge in 2013 in Greg Hardy. Their linebackers are fantastic, led by Luke Kuechly, and they've got a very talented secondary. They're one of the few teams in the NFL that is ranked in total defense in the top 10 in both against the run and the pass. So they don't have a lot of weaknesses defensively. They can play most schemes without having to do a lot of mixing and matching and things like that. They don't have to be as creative as the Cowboys sometimes have to, especially on passing downs with their cornerbacks. The Panthers can be more like the Seattle Seahawks in that they can play their straight scheme and add little wrinkles here and there to exploit weaknesses of their opponent, but they're not going to deviate a lot from what they do.
Well, one thing that they do is they put a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and that is one thing that you got to worry about this week with the Cowboys. Romo, despite having that awesome offensive line, he took a lot of hits in the ball game in his first time back after 7 weeks, and I thought that the offensive line, in times, for instance, Tyron Smith did not have a great game this past weekend. So what are the big concerns this week when you start talking about this defense against the Cowboys offensive line?
Well, I think the big concern, is the Cowboys offensive line has to win, or at least has to win to a draw, the one-on-one matchups with these guys, specifically Jared Allen and Charles Johnson and these other pass rushers. They've got to be in a position where Tyron Smith can handle Jared Allen on a regular basis, where Doug Free can handle the guy on the left edge on a regular basis. This can't be a situation where they're going to have to use double teams or chips or things like that, because that's going to steal away people to block from their talented defensive tackles or even blitzing linebackers. Ron Rivera is a Buddy Ryan disciple. He played for Buddy Ryan in the 80s. He played for the Bears during that Super Bowl era, so he plays an aggressive defense, an aggressive 4-3 that uses blitzing linebackers and uses multiple blitzers off the edge to try and create mismatches. So Cowboys offensive line is going to have to play a great game on Thursday. There's absolutely no question about that. I think also for the Cowboys, they've got to do as good a job as they did on Sunday against Miami of establishing the run game. Because if they can do that, if they can force the Panthers to respect Darren McFadden and respect the rest of the run game, that's going to put them in more favorable matchups in the passing game for two reasons. One, it's probably going to lead to shorter downs and distances in the passing game on second and third down. And two, it's going to force the Panthers to not be able to use as many overloads or as many blitz schemes as they would like to if they have the offense pushed back into those 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10 situations, which are usually more favorable to blitzing the quarterback.
All right, let's go ahead and talk about the Cowboys side of things and what's been going on this week. Again, a lot of talk about the fact that the Cowboys now, with the 3-7 mark, come into this ball game with a 1-point favorite. A lot of people comparing this team to Carolina, as a matter of fact. Carolina last year, 3-8-1, 3-7, 3-8-1, and then won 4 in a row to make it into the playoffs last year.
They did. They did. I mean, there's certainly a nice positive allegory there if you're a Cowboys fan, based on what Carolina did a year ago. And believe me, this NFC East is about as bad as the NFC South was a year ago. It was a horrible division, and this one is too. I don't know what the Panthers' schedule was necessarily coming down the stretch. All I know is that when I look at Dallas's schedule and I see the Panthers and I see the Jets, and I see the Redskins twice, and I see road games at Green Bay and at Buffalo in the teeth of winter, I don't like their chances of running the table, finishing 9-7, and winning the division. They might go 8-8. That might be enough to win the division, but you got to remember they have splits divisionally against the Giants or the Eagles, so they don't win the first tiebreaker. They don't lose it either, but they don't win it, and then it comes down to the divisional record, and who knows where that ends at the end of the season. So I just feel like the mountain is too tall for these guys to climb. It's a theoretical possibility, but I still don't look at it as a realistic possibility. And it certainly isn't realistic if they lose to the Panthers on Thursday.
Okay, amongst the injuries to deal with, Mo Claiborne not available at all, and was out most of the game this past Sunday against the Dolphins. How much does that affect the Cowboys secondary?
Well, remember when we talked last year when Claiborne got hurt and was out for the year? I remember saying back then that it really doesn't hurt them from an on-field standpoint because he really wasn't contributing anything. It just hurts them from a depth standpoint. It's a little bit different this year because Claiborne's been having a better year than he had in any of the two previous years, in my opinion. Granted, I wouldn't say he was playing at a high level, but he was certainly improved over a year ago. So I think this does hurt them a little bit, not just from a depth standpoint, but from a quality of play standpoint. Byron Jones got burned a couple of times last week. There are some corrections to be made there, but really you've got three corners that you're using right now, and that you're using Brandon Carr, Tyler Patman, and Byron Jones. The real worry I have is that they lose one of their safeties. If they lose Barry Church or they lose J.J. Wilcox, then they're going to have to manufacture something from a depth standpoint because Byron Jones is going to have to move over to the safety position, and then Tyler Patman's going to have to take on one of the main cornerback roles, and then you're really up a creek when it comes to depth. So the Cowboys really can't afford any more injuries at the cornerback or the safety position, and they need to hope that Claiborne's able to come back after this 10-day break after this game.
On the other side of the ball, Darren McFadden still limited in practice, although he had an exceptional game Sunday, putting up almost 130 yards rushing. What's his situation for this week?
Well, he's still practicing, so I think he's a go. I mean, the final injury report will be out tomorrow, but I really don't see any, barring a major setback on his part, I don't see him missing the game. They are limiting his availability in practice this week, and I think they're just doing that from the standpoint of just preserving his health at this point. But unless he has a major setback during the walkthrough on Wednesday, I think he plays. And the Cowboys need him to play. He's their only legitimate three-down back in this offense now. Robert Turbin did a nice job as a change of pace guy on Sunday, but I think you and I both agree that in the space that Matt Castle was the starting quarterback after they gave the starting running back role to Darren McFadden, it was clear that he gave this offense a jolt. And the Cowboys are at the point now where they can't really do without him. But you got to think about the injury situation, and that's always going to be a concern. He's had 122 carries in his last 5 games. That's the most carries he's had in any 5-game stretch in his entire career. You kind of hold your breath a little bit every time you watch him run, but the Cowboys really have no choice. They have to give him the ball as many times as he wants.
With this game coming up this week, obviously a lot of the talk has been about the infamous Greg Hardy facing his former team, and a lot of people talking about what a great teammate Greg Hardy is. Cam Newton was quoted as saying he's a great teammate. Tony Romo says he thinks that Greg Hardy's handled himself very well while he's been with the Cowboys. How much of a factor is he going to be in this ball game, and how much of a factor is it that he's playing against his former team?
I think it's a factor. I really do. And I'm not one of those people that buys into that necessarily, but this is a guy who was basically suspended for 15 games in 2014, and not by the NFL, but by his own team after the court case came to pass. He played 1 game, and then the Panthers took him off the field due to a lot of backlash locally and nationally. I think he still has a chip on his shoulder. There's no question in my mind about that. I think we could end up seeing the Greg Hardy that had 2 sacks against the Patriots in his first game back from the 4-game suspension that he served at the beginning of this year. So normally I don't put a lot of stock in that whole revenge factor. I certainly didn't put that put any stock in it with Marco Murray when they met earlier this year, but with Greg Hardy, I think the situation is very different because their parting of the ways was not terribly acrimonious, or I should say, was acrimonious, and I think Hardy has something to prove to that team and to the NFL really about his ability to play. Right now, it's really the only thing he has to hang his hat on because when you talk, I mean, you hear the talk about him being a good teammate, and that's great, but that's not really what anybody focuses on outside of the locker room and outside of his ability to play. He really doesn't have anything else to
Although
hang
when you
his
look
hat
at
on in
him,
this
he's
world
got
right
that
now, at
Eddie
least not
Murphy
for a
kill
while.
my landlord kind of look on his face, and you think, he might break Cam Newton in half if he gets half a chance to get a hold of him.
Yeah, he's an aggressive player, no question about that. I think that if he gets any chance to take a shot at the quarterback, he's going to take it. If I'm the Cowboys, I'm talking to him, not just about being an aggressive player, but not being too aggressive because sometimes that can lead to a late hit that'll cost you 15 yards in terms of a penalty. You could end up with a targeting penalty. I mean, aggression on the field is good thing. You need it in the NFL, but I would imagine the Cowboys will have a little conversation with him about just not being too aggressive, so it's to the
Now, the other
detriment
thing about
of the
this game,
Cowboys as opposed to the
Romo
benefit.
sat out practice. Des Bryant, I think, also may have sat out practice this week. Is that right? At least for one day. So what about their health going into this ball game? I know Romo is going to play. Obviously, I know Des is going to play. But how much of a factor was this first time out for Romo, getting bounced around a little bit, and with being his age and the layoff and all?
Didn't seem to really have an impact. He hasn't talked about any sort of issues related to the injury or anything like that. Um, he seemed to move around well, in my opinion, on Sunday. He did have the day off on Monday, so did Dez. I think that was really just a Veterans Day for both of them, just to give them a little recovery time after the game. With a short week, they would, normally have Tuesday off in a normal week, but with this week, they just gave them Monday off so they could get a little extra rest. I don't anticipate either of them missing on Thursday. Dez looks 100% to me. I didn't really see any noticeable hitch in his giddy up on Sunday. Romo looks like he's darn near close to 100%. I would expect both of them
There
to
was a
play,
time in the
and
history of these
depending
Dallas
upon the
Cowboys
flow
when
of the
this was
game,
a
play well.
major uh, benefit for them. They have a real edge by being able to play every Thursday, every Thanksgiving Day at home, and then knowing that they got the 10 days off. When you got guys like Romo, though, that need that extra time, that extra rest, is that still does that still give them the edge that it used to?
Well, I think when you talk about that edge, I think you talk about a team like Dallas who does this once a year, every year, and has done it once a year, every year for 46 years. As an organization, they understand how to prepare on a short week, whereas an organization like Carolina that plays, one Thursday game a year, may not necessarily have as good a grasp on it. I mean, Jason Garrett played in a whole bunch of these games. He knows the preparation schedule. They were preparing for Carolina last week, kind of under the radar. That's what they usually do. In fact, Tony Romo was taking a look at Carolina tape, I think, late last week, just to kind of get a head start on everything. So I think organizationally speaking, they understand how to prepare for a game like this. What you're talking about, Tony Romo's age, being able to bounce back physically, that's a case by case individual thing. And yeah, I'm sure Tony Romo at this point in his career would love to have the full week to rest and get ready for the next game, but it's not a luxury that's afforded him on the schedule. So I'm sure in his mind he's preparing in a way that will do everything possible to keep him healthy going into the game on Thursday and get through the game on Thursday so he can get that extra rest on the weekend. The Cowboys have typically done pretty well on Thanksgiving. They've also done typically pretty well after the break. And this will actually be, I think, the first time in 3 years in which they've had the full 10-day break after Thanksgiving. I think the previous 2 years they played on Thanksgiving Thursday, then they played the following Thursday. So this will actually be the first time in a couple years they get the full
How
10
much
days
credence do you
rest
put
and
into
the full
things
10 days
like,
benefit of
well,
playing
I
on
just lost it.
Thanksgiving
I
Day.
thought I was going to be able to show it. Let's see if I can. It's not good. Yeah, of course. Yeah, here we go. How much credence do you put into this into the Sports
I saw a
Illustrated
cover of
coverage game?
Sports
This
Illustrated
is a
there.
cover of Sports Illustrated just days before the Cowboys game.
hmm it's weird. It seems to have a habit of rearing its ugly head. I don't put a whole lot of credence into it. I'm not a very superstitious person, but Sports Illustrated actually did an issue several years ago about the SI cover jinx, and strangely enough, when you look at when the covers come out related to something negative that happens to the player that's on the cover, it's downright eerie. The things that happen. Um, I heard an old story about that SI issue. Nobody wanted to be on the cover. They asked several different athletes to be on the cover, and none of them wanted to be on the cover. So they actually put a black cat on the cover of Sports Illustrated that week. It's very odd. It's very weird. It's very eerie. I don't put a whole lot of stock in it, but if you're a Cowboys fan and you're clinging to every nugget of awesome you can this week, you're
I'm
probably
all for
loving
any
this
kind of
because if
edge
you
you can
believe in the
get.
SI cover jinx, then that means the Panthers are probably going to lose on Thursday. Yeah, exactly. At this point in the
And I would
season,
just
when
tell
you're in the
you,
situation
as
the
an
Cowboys
LSU
are in,
fan,
you're
Leonard
looking
Fournette
for
was
every
on the
edge you can
cover
get, and that
a few
includes
weeks
fans
ago.
as
He was
well.
on the cover of every magazine, and you see what's happened here lately with them. So I'm not I'm not going to deny that it's a definite factor. That's for sure. Yeah.
Oh well,
No,
I mean,
not at all.
yeah, I mean,
What else is going on
certainly
out
not
there that
good
we need to
timing.
know about
That's
as
for
far as this
sure.
ball game's concerned, as far as any news from the week that we have not covered at this point?
I think we've covered everything pertinent. It's actually been kind of a quiet week, and it usually is Thanksgiving week. There's usually not enough time to really delve into and dig into the bigger stories that we normally do during the week because of the short week. So I think going into this game, I think the big thing that Cowboys fans want to see is whether or not the Cowboys can bounce back, get a second win in a row. Remember that they'll another thing to cling to. The Cowboys are undefeated when Tony Romo starts. They're 3-0. Cowboys fans are just hoping
Yeah, and there are
that
a lot of people
the turkey
really
will go down a
concerned
little bit
after
smoother
watching
on
last
Thursday
year and the
evening
beatdown
if
that
the
the Eagles
Cowboys
put
are able
on
to
them
beat
on
the Panthers.
Thanksgiving Day, and hoping that they don't end up getting indigestion on Thanksgiving Day with the ball game like that, with a team like this.
Absolutely. I think this Panthers team is probably better than that Eagles team they
Well,
played
they certainly have,
on
at this
Thanksgiving Day
point,
last
owned
year. So I think
everybody
this
in
is
the
going to be a much
NFC
tougher ball game
East.
from that
So
standpoint.
I wouldn't have to disagree with you on that at all. All right, so what's coming up on Rattle and Hum Sports in the coming days, or day
hmm
or two before the ball game?
Indeed. Well, I'm going to try and bang out a piece here in the next day or so for the game, and obviously we'll podcast at some point after the Thursday game, and I'll have my post game piece on the side as well, and then I think we'll both try and take a break for a few days and see how the rest of the NFC East plays out over the weekend. If the Cowboys win and some of those teams in the East lose, then all of a sudden you're talking about maybe it being a game behind as opposed to two. I'm not saying that I think it's going to happen. I'm just saying that there's actually a possibility if things fall the right way, the Cowboys could actually gain some ground this weekend. But they've got to win first on Thursday against the Panthers. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not taking the Cowboys in this game.
I don't see
I'm
how
not
any
buying the whole
reasonable
1 point
person could
favorite thing.
possibly see that
I think the
the
Panthers are the
Cowboys would
better
be a
team, and I
favorite in
think
a
the
ball
Panthers
game
will
like
win this
this, no
game.
matter how well they played this past weekend. I'll come back to that in a sec.
Well, I think okay. Well, I think we know that Vegas does the odds a little bit differently than you or I think. I mean, I'm
There's no
sure that a
question
one
about
point
that.
favorite to them means they're not going to make a lot of money, but they're not going to lose a lot of money either on that game. So
the reason I brought this picture up is
if anything
because,
else, it does make
make
it easier for the Panthers to cover even if they lose. They just have to lose by one.
If one guy had his way, Johnny Manziel once again shows up with a video of him in a bar, holding a bottle, and of course there's always a video phone somewhere nearby. So he goes from he's going from being the starter for the rest of the season to now being the third string quarterback for probably the rest of the year for the Cleveland Browns. And there are a lot of people who are still out there saying Dallas would be the perfect place for him to end up. Wow. No, I've never caught you this speechless before.
First of all,
yeah, that's going to happen.
Oh, goodness. First of all, he's got to get his personal thing together. Second of all, he's got to learn that everybody has a camera phone. Third, Browns have to... Third, the Browns have to release him. I mean, I'm not saying they have to release him. In order for the Cowboys to even have a shot at him, the Browns have to release him. And he has 3 more years left in his contract. I don't know why you would necessarily cut bait on him at this point. Aside from the personal stuff, he hasn't played very well. But then again, the Browns really haven't given him a lot of opportunity to really show what he can do. I thought that when they gave him the starting job a couple of weeks ago, that was the idea, to give him some time to show whether he can be the starter or not.
And if he sucks in practice, he's not getting into a game. I mean, and that's the bottom line. And that's
it does.
I know this much about the NFL, and Greg Hardy is my greatest example of that. You can be an axe murderer, but if you can play, somebody's going to give you a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And right now, Johnny Manziel really hasn't proven that he can play in the NFL. Doesn't mean he won't get another chance somewhere else if the Browns release him. But to me, he's got to pull the personal thing together. Jerry, actually, the Cowboys aren't exactly a bad location for that, because Jerry will give a guy a lot of rope, which can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on the point of view. But
right now,
it would be yet another distraction for this team. But ultimately, I think this shows that this was a Jimmy Haslam selection when they selected him on draft day 2 years ago. This was not something Mike Pettin wanted. This was not something he advocated. This came straight from the owner. I want this guy. I want this guy to come to Cleveland. I want, Johnny Football. It eerily emulates the plot in Draft Day, the Kevin Costner movie, except that Costner didn't take the hotshot quarterback that the owner wanted him to take. So it tells me that Cleveland's a pretty dysfunctional place to be. And it tells me that Johnny Manziel probably won't be in Cleveland much longer.
One other thing just came down. Jimmy Johnson and Terrell Owens named semifinalists for the Hall of Fame class of 2016. Thoughts?
Did you say who and Owens?
Johnson, Terrell Owens and Jimmy Johnson. Yes.
Terrell Owens and Jimmy Johnson. Well, I think T.O. has the numbers to be in the Hall of Fame. He has more than has the numbers. It's just whether or not people are going to overlook the knucklehead stuff that he did. And I mean, this isn't a guy like Greg Hardy. He didn't do anything like that. He was just at worst, he was just a huge distraction to his football team. At best, he was one of the most highly productive receivers in the NFL. So I think ultimately at some point Terrell Owens will get in the Hall of Fame. I just don't think it'll be early on in his eligibility. I think they're going to make him wait a few years. Jimmy Johnson's a harder case because even though he won 2 Super Bowls in Dallas, and you could probably give him a tip of the hat for the third one after he left, he didn't coach very long in the NFL. He only coached 5 years in Dallas. He only coached a handful of years in Miami, and he wasn't nearly as successful in Miami as he was in Dallas. I think that makes him a harder sell just because even though he was successful, he didn't do it over a long period of time like a Tom Landry or a Chuck Noll or even a Bill Cowher. And I can't recall if Bill Cowher's in the Hall of Fame or not, but he had a long, successful 14-year career that led to a Super Bowl championship. The two Super Bowl wins are what's going to keep Jimmy Johnson in that conversation. But I don't know. I don't know if he ever gets in, to be honest with you. I think it has to do just with the fact that he didn't coach very long and that he was only successful in a very short period of time.
Well, I got to tell you, I think the guy's a Hall of Fame coach and the GM because he put together a roster from a bag of crap in that first year and then pulled off the trade of the century when he was able to steal a bunch of draft picks and players from the Minnesota Vikings for Herschel Walker. Jerry Jones can take all the credit for that he wants, but we know who the brains was
and he
behind
has.
that. Yes, I know.
And he has.
And that's all fine and good. And Jerry's going to get his place in the Hall of Fame one day also. But although why, I wouldn't know when you look at the overall work. But, I just think Jimmy, based on what he did with what he had and what he had to work with and the way he had to build that, not only from a coaching standpoint, but also from a personnel standpoint, building that team and then putting it in a position to win 3 out of 4 Super Bowls in that era. In this day and age, it's kind of like what starting pitchers are going to be like in the Hall of Fame from here on out. You're never going to see another 300-game winner.
Yeah.
You're never going to see another 300-game winner in the NFL, I don't believe. You're not going to find guys like Tom Landry and Don Shula and people like that hung on for 30-plus years. It's just not going to happen anymore.
And it's an interesting litmus case if you're thinking along the lines of what you're talking about. Johnson would be a very good litmus case for that. A guy who coached about a decade, won 2 Super Bowl championships. Would that, enable a gateway for coaches who serve a shorter tenure but have a lot of success, into the Hall of Fame? Would that pave a way for? Think about if Mike Tomlin's career ended tomorrow in Pittsburgh, would he be a Hall of Fame candidate with a Super Bowl ring and a lot of success in Pittsburgh? So it'll be interesting to see how the committee looks at Johnson because of that. I think they may hold the duration of his career against him, but they certainly can't hold against him the body of his work in Dallas.
I will say this. I don't think one Super Bowl ring guarantees you a spot in the Hall of Fame. If that were the case,
no, it shouldn't.
Brian Billick would be a Hall of Famer. We know that's not the case. He caught lightning in the bottle with a great defense one year. We see teams like that pop up and come and go. But I do believe when you've got 2, and we all know that had he stayed, he'd have won at least another one, just like the team that he left behind. He may have lost the next year, just like Barry Switzer did, but I do believe that he would have kept that team winning and probably have been the head coach of another championship had he stayed.
I think you can make a very strong case for that. I mean, if he had decided to stay in Dallas a couple more years and they had won 4 straight, there'd be no question he'd be in the Hall of Fame, even if he had just retired the day after the 4th championship. But I'm very interested to see how I'm very interested to see how the committee looks at him, especially if he manages to make it to being a finalist. I'm very curious to see how they look at his candidacy because it could tell us a lot about how they're going to view coaches with shorter career spans, but ultimate success during that span in the future.
And one last thing, if this guy makes it in, then I think George Teague has to make it in too for rocking his jock on the star one day back when he was a 49er. Okay?
I was at that game. I was at that game. I was in the press box. I witnessed the whole thing. Watching Terrell Owens run out to the star the first time was just absolutely one of the most surreal things I've ever seen at any sporting event because it made absolutely no sense when he did it. But when he slammed that ball in the star, honestly, for a couple of seconds, he sucked all the air out of the building, and then everybody just booed him mercilessly. It was amazing to me that several years later he ended up in Dallas because of that, because Cowboys fans have very long memories.
Well, thank you, Jerry Jones, for that, because nobody else was in favor of him being here. So, Matthew, great talking to you as always. Happy Thanksgiving, and we'll watch the game and then visit about that afterwards, okay?
All right, sounds good.
All right, great. Matthew Postins covering the Cowboys for Rattle and Hum Sports. I'm Bryan Houston. You can see this and other Spreecast on rattleandhumsports.com. Actually, the website is www.randhsports.com. Thanks very much for watching. Again, happy Thanksgiving to you, and we'll talk to you after the Cowboys and the Carolina Panthers. Have a great one.